Well, here we are with Pete Zadoretsky. Pete's the Vice President of Sustainability at Bozzuto Management Company. Pete manages thousands of units for Bozzuto, and he's a lead AP O&M and a Fitwel ambassador as well. And we're going to talk today about how to do the best job of getting electric vehicle ports and charging stations into your projects, both new and retrofit construction. So Pete, I understand, welcome to the Weekly. Nice to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Great. And I understand one of the most important things is getting started early on the projects for both new particularly for new construction.
Absolutely. If you're building something new, make sure that you've got your EV charging, a strategy thought out, day one as much as you can, and not only be thinking about what you're going to deliver on your ribbon cutting opening day, but, the future proofing of that asset. What is your demand going to be looking like 3 years out, 5 years out, and that sort of thing. And
right.
Making sure you've got electrical capacity, conduit, all that sort of stuff.
Right.
Planned in.
And you've got, as a property manager, you've got a lot more properties under management than you're building new. And if you're going to be retrofitting, that retrofit requires a different set of considerations, doesn't it?
Exactly. The installation costs are going to be considerably higher on a retrofit versus a new construction. So you'll likely be looking to install, adjacent to an electrical room. You're going to need to consider, what your parking capacity is versus, current demand. How many parking spaces can you, quote unquote, sacrifice, right, for EV charging only, and that sort of thing. So there's, similar but different looking at retrofit versus, new construction.
You've hinted at a couple of the actual physical things that you have to install EV ports. Obviously, some sort of electrical conduit. What are some of the factors that are important to think about in the design?
For new construction, certainly you're looking at, your electrical capacity. Are you pulling enough power from the street? And are you going to have enough room in your electrical room to add infrastructure down the road? Are you going to be delivering 10% of your parking as EV from day one? With your existing infrastructure, be able to ramp that up to 25% or 50% or whatever it may be, physically, and that sort of thing. Are you going to need to have to pull new power from the grid, which is, possibly prohibitively expensive. So that, really needs to be thought in.
Mm-hmm. And you've got jurisdictions around the country that are requiring a certain percentage or a certain number of EV ports, particularly obviously mostly in new construction, and that's got to be a consideration. I've heard everything from 10 to 20% of parking spaces for EV, depending on the jurisdiction. Is that?
Yes, and there are some out west where they're looking at 100% make ready.
Explain what make ready means. What you mean by make ready?
So a make ready kind of alludes to what I was talking about earlier of making sure that you have the capacity in your infrastructure. So in the electrical room, then your conduit runs and stuff like that to get EV port at literally every parking space in that parking structure or parking lot or what have you. So you can plug and play the actual port when the demand is there. Don't quote me 100% on that, but that's essentially what that means.
So it's sort of like solar. You're not putting in the PVs, but you're making it ready so that when the price is right or whatever, the contractor can put in PVs later. So it's the same kind of principle. Yeah. Okay. All right. And then I guess one of the tough things, you've kind of alluded to it. There's requirements by jurisdictions that says, 10%, 15%, 20 or more. But from a marketing point of view, from a business point of view, figuring out what's the right touch point of how many ports how many spaces to supply with ports is probably a difficult calculation, isn't it?
It's just like anything else, right? There's no crystal ball, so we have to, we have to balance whatever jurisdictional mandate might be there. If we're pursuing a lead requirement that might award credits for X amount percentage of electric vehicle stations and that sort of thing, versus what does the data tell us? And we work with a partner, a charging station provider that they're able to actually show us per zip code the amount of new electric vehicle registrations, trend lines. We can look at the data on just looking at the number of auto manufacturers that have committed to all or partial EV conversion to their vehicles in the months and years to come. It's
I remember
all together.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I remember in the early days of LEED, but going back to 2000, where they said there was stuff about electric vehicles, and we were saying, what electrical vehicles? What electric vehicles? Now we're seeing them. I mean, they're really out there. I mean, Tesla is one of the the most valuable company, one of the most valuable companies in the world. There's for a developer and for the architects and engineers who are supplying them and the contractors, there are subsidies out there, aren't there, for government, state and local subsidies available for installation of EV ports?
Yes, there are a bunch. Obviously, it varies by your locality, but across the Eastern Seaboard, we are seeing upwards of 80–90% of the upfront cost being offset by a combination of utility incentives, state incentives, and I know they're out there, although our clients aren't really able to take advantage of them, but tax credit incentives as well. And we're even seeing some now that we're able to offset the monthly operating costs of some of our fully networked stations as well, which is really helpful.
Yeah, so the team should look into that and make sure that they're getting every dollar advantage they can, obviously. You've mentioned that it's important to make future tenants, future occupiers aware that you have EV ports. I mean, it's become an amenities marketing touch point, hasn't it?
You froze on me there. Could you repeat?
I'm sorry. I was saying that the availability of EV ports in one of your properties is a marketing advantage.
It would be hard pressed to say I've got hard data on that, but and we're certainly not being helped by the multiple listing sites like apartments.com and some of those folks that you can't filter by who has EV charging, and that's one thing that one thing we're battling, and I'm on a campaign internally to on the Bozzuto.com website to be able to filter by what sites have EV charging. Craigslist, I think, is the only one that has EV charging as a checkbox to look for your new apartment home.
Wow.
And I'm also working to make sure that in our amenity photo gallery per community where we have EV charging, show that is a marketable and desirable amenity.
Yeah. It's also important to, I gather, to kind of install the right kind of signage to make sure that you're not running into problems with tenants who do not have EV vehicles parking in those spaces, isn't it? I mean, is that a common problem in that you must confront as a manager of buildings?
It's a common problem that we've experienced in our buildings, and as an EV driver, it's a common problem that I've encountered myself. It's incredibly frustrating. Imagine going to the gas station and there's a boatload of Teslas just parked in front of the pumps and you can't get to them. It's
also just the opposite, Pete. I mean, it's gas run.
Well, exactly.
Vehicles parking in the EV spots.
Exactly, and that's what I was alluding to. So, So anytime that I'm in a budget conversation and a planning discussion with a team, I make sure that, as part of the, the graphics package that the marketing and graphic design team is working on, consider your wayfinding, especially in mixed use communities. How easy is it for an EV driver to find the bay of stations? And, certainly in our, resident only garages, making sure that we have adequate, bright signage, make it fun, make it, part of the aesthetic of the community, and celebrate that amenity just like we would anything else.
Yeah, there's quite a few. I mean, there's a lot of there are options out there in terms of suppliers, different levels. There are different levels, I gather, of charging capability out there. So I'm guessing those are also important considerations, whether for new construction or for retrofit.
Certainly. So, when it comes down to the equipment, you're going to be looking at what's best for your company and your situation, right? So, so for us, regardless of retrofit or new installation, we prefer fully networked charging stations where we can, for instance, recoup the cost of electricity consumed during EV charging sessions. We can manage access control. We can manage demand. So if we have, 2 ports for 10 drivers, we can set time limits and those sorts of things. And then we can just better understand how the stations are being used. The provider can help us with real-time fault diagnostics and real-time upgrades and stuff like that. Because at the end of the day, we are not EV charging experts.
No.
And as a, reasonably higher end, high cost, high upfront cost amenity, we want to ensure that amenity is going to be working 100% of the time. And if not, what do we do to do it? What do we need to do to fix that?
How long have you been installing? How long has Bozzuto been installing EV ports, and what has been your experience? Are the ports getting used?
Yeah. So I think our first EV station when I started about 8 years ago, and it was the first one in Baltimore City. And it's interesting because we could have 2 properties across the street from each other. One's getting a boatload of usage and the other isn't. Certainly in the urban environments where we're seeing a lot more usage versus suburban. But I think as range anxiety goes down, as more manufacturers are producing more vehicles that are less expensive with longer range, we're going to see an infiltration just across the portfolio, regardless of garden style suburban versus urban high rise.
Well, I got to get me one of those EV trucks.
Yeah, they're great, right?
All right. Well, Pete Zadoretsky, you've been a great inspiration about electric vehicles here today. Congratulations and thank you. Pete is the Vice President of Sustainability at Bozzuto Management Company, and we've been talking about how to some of his advice about installing electric vehicle ports in your apartment or mixed use commercial building. Thanks a lot, Pete. Great to talk to you.
Likewise. Thank you.